Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we're going to be going through delivery and production estimates for Tesla's fourth quarter. We expect them to report these sometime on Sunday or Monday. And today I'm just going to go through both the consensus estimates as well as my own forecast, which hopefully no major shocks here as we've kind of been keeping track of this throughout the quarter. So it should be relatively quick to go through this time, but we'll see where my final estimates are for both production and deliveries for both Q4 and then for the year as well. As we wrap this up. So first things first, just quick update on the news. Obviously Tesla this morning in terms of the stock was down a bit as there was news of recall of about 300,000 Model 3s and 115,000 or so Model S's for different reasons. The Model 3 is something to do with the trunk and when latching potentially messing up with the rear view camera. So not really any major safety concern on that one, I don't think. And then on the Model S, there's just some front trunk issues. Where potentially things could get released and the front trunk could then fly up. So Tesla will obviously be able to handle those with service, most likely mobile service in most cases. And I think the market kind of realizing that after the news this morning of that recall. So Tesla rebounding nicely here, up about 0.5% right now. Let's just make sure this is working okay. I am live, so for anyone that is listening on the audio, this is going to be pretty spreadsheet heavy, as these episodes usually are. All right, so let's flip over to Excel here then. Just a quick FYI, I'm leaving. We're doing this early in the day because I have to catch a flight in about 2.5 hours. So we're going to hustle through this, and I won't have time to get to any questions. So just keep that in mind if you are thinking about giving a super chat. Obviously, always appreciated, but I won't be able to respond to those. All right, so let's flip over to Excel. Give me just 1 second here, and we'll start going through the numbers. I just have to pull up one thing quick. All right, so first off, before we even get into my numbers, just to go through the analyst consensus estimate, right now it's sitting at 165,700 vehicles. That's from the company compiled estimate. That's from about 24 different analysts, something in that ballpark. I think the real expectations are probably a little bit higher. There are probably a fair amount of analysts in here that have not updated their forecasts as the quarter has gone along. So I do expect that, sort of the whisper number is a little bit higher. I think FactSet's also a little bit higher at around 276,000 for Q4. I expect the expectations, funny way of saying that, but I expect the expectations to be somewhere in that, 280,000-ish range for deliveries, and then probably a bit higher for production. So with that in mind, let's go through my forecast and see what I'm expecting and if we'll see a beat. So we'll start off here with China. Obviously, as we've talked about so far, we've seen 112,000 vehicles produced in Shanghai for the quarter so far through October and November. And as usual here, we're going through production and then we'll work into deliveries later. I don't care about deliveries. Tesla's clearly production constrained. So it's really just a matter of how inventory gets drawn down. And we'll talk about that as we get to deliveries. But here we're talking production. Just to quickly walk through, I know most of you have probably seen this, but over here I just have total production split up by factory. So Fremont and Shanghai combined and then split out. Then we've got weekly production to look at the rates, then by model for Fremont and by model for Shanghai. The orange is stuff we have high confidence in that's been reported out of China, and the yellow is our forecast, gray are knowns. So let's get into the December forecast here for China. I think that's the easiest place to start. I am expecting a bit of an increase here for production, just because of, well, not just because, but a big reason is that we did have that teaser from Tesla analyst Shanghai on Twitter a couple days ago saying, something about a big surprise on Friday. We should actually get that sometime later today in the US time zone, an update from that account, which has been pretty reliable historically. So based on that and knowing that retail sales is what they always report, retail sales in September, the last month of Q3, were pretty strong at about 52,000. I expect retail sales in China this month to be you know, it would be pretty weird to be excited about anything less than 5,000 above that, I think. So I'm expecting retail sales somewhere around 60,000, and then maybe a little bit in terms of exports to get those wholesale sales numbers up. And then I'm kind of working into production from that expectation, somewhere in that ballpark. I think Tesla will actually be able to do a little bit more than this in wholesale sales. They did build inventory in China in the first 2 months, so they should be able to have wholesale sales exceed production for December. Anyway, long way of saying I'm at 62,000 for December, a bit of an increase over November, but still not quite matching up to the weekly production rate that we saw in October, if we do consider those, you know, those days of downtime there in the first part of October. About 14,000 a week versus, you know, 15,500 peak in October. So I do still expect that Tesla's a bit supply constrained here, but still finding ways to increase that production a little bit. I've got Model 3 and Model Y increasing by about 5% each, which, you know, should be attainable if they don't have worse constraints than they had in November. So let's just take a look at how that shakes out for Shanghai for the year. Put Shanghai at about 174,000 for Q4 and about 480,000 vehicles produced for the year. And I'm just unhiding sort of the totals and the weekly rates there. This bottom line is total year, and the line above that is total Q4. So this is a little bit lower than what I had thought possible after October, and a little bit higher than I think the most recent numbers I had in there. Again, just based on some of the things we've been seeing out of Shanghai in terms of strong production rates, with some of those drone flyovers showing really high potential, mixed with the analyst update, Tesla Shanghai analyst update, as well as something that I forgot about. Okay, so anyway, let's move on to Fremont then. And here I'm just going to start off with the by model grouping. So we have had pretty good reports out of Fremont in terms of production, specifically for Model 3 and Model Y. These are mostly word of mouth type of things, so we can't necessarily have high confidence, but everything that I've heard throughout the quarter has been that Fremont production has been going pretty well. So if we look at Model 3, basically what I'm doing here is just taking the year-to-date average. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact split from Model 3 to Model Y, but based on, you know, my estimates, I'm just taking the year-to-date average for Q1 through Q3, comes out to, you know, 52,950. Putting that in, I think that's fairly conservative to expect for Q4. If we look at last year, Q4 was peak production for Model 3, even though that was kind of when Model Y was hitting its ramp as well. You know, Q3 and Q4 last year. So Tesla definitely has capability of doing this. It's really just a matter of how they're allocating their resources. And, you know, we have seen drops from that peak before, but just knowing that Q4 was strong last year, I think Q4 can again be strong. And I'm hoping this is actually even a little bit conservative for Model 3. For Model Y, I'm expecting kind of a bigger increase here. Again, that's based on just word of mouth reporting that the production has been going smoothly. People have been getting deliveries moved up a little bit from their first expectations. I think that's mostly due to cancellations or delays from the impact of the federal tax credit status. And obviously that's been uncertain, so I think people have been potentially delaying, and I think that's been a reason for a lot of the move up, but some of the communication from Tesla in those cases has been that production has been going faster. And again, that matches with just some of the word of mouth that I've heard. So I do think we're going to see a Model Y increase. Hopefully, you know, this should be attainable based on sort of looking at Q2 numbers. You know, we're kind of forecasting the same rate roughly for Model 3 and Model Y as we saw in Q2 there. I'm at 106,000 versus, you know, 6,000. So it's only about 700 more than what we saw for Fremont in Q2. The additional production then is coming from Model S and X. So obviously Q2, Q3, that was all Model S. So a pretty good ramp up there at an additional 6,500 vehicles or so in Q3 versus Q2. The production rate didn't increase quite as much though, because remember Q2, that was just getting started at production in those final couple of weeks. So it that was one of the reasons I was a little bit aggressive on my Q3 forecast, was because I had forecast more Model S production. Being a little bit more conservative on that this time, I'm expecting 13,500 Model S and X combined. And mostly what I'm saying there is that we see a slight uptick in Model S production, which, it seems to have been going pretty smoothly, but I don't want to over forecast on that. And then Model X is definitely an unknown, but given what Model S was able to do in the first quarter, expecting, at least 1,000 or 2,000 Model X's to be produced in Q4 based on what Model S was able to do. So if you take a couple thousand out of this, you're still seeing a little bit of an increase quarter over quarter in Model S production, and basically a slower ramp up than Model S for Model X, because again, Q2, that was sort of towards the end of the quarter. So across the board here, there's definitely potential for these to be conservative, but there was potential for them to be conservative last quarter, and Fremont didn't quite live up to previous production rates there. So I'm a little bit gun shy on, over forecasting just based on some of that. The other thing here to consider is that we don't necessarily know if there is a constraint from a total vehicle output perspective. Maybe the paint shop, maybe staff availability, numerous other things could limit just total output. I'm not necessarily forecasting for that though, but it does make me a little more cautious in each of these individual buckets. So at any rate, all said, I'm at 120,000 vehicles produced from Fremont. That'd be up 12,000 vehicles from Q3 and Q2 as well. We have seen higher peaks though, as I mentioned before. Q4 last year was 113,000. So with the addition of Model S and X here, that's almost the entire increase from where Q2 was at. Just like we talked about Model 3 and Y, basically at what I'm forecasting for Q3. Then you layer in, an 11,000 difference in S and X, and you're at 120,000. So I'm sure people are getting ahead on the math here, but altogether that puts my, I'll zoom in a little bit here. Altogether that puts my total Q4 production forecast at just under 295,000, about 294,600. I would say there's a decently high error bar as we continue to get more and more factories, more and more models. We're up to 2 factories, 4 models. We've never been in that situation before. Or at least we haven't been in that situation very long before. So the more variety there is, the harder these forecasts are going to get, and the less confidence we can have in them. But I feel pretty good about this being hopefully within, 5,000 vehicles or so each way. And then that'll put the total year, well, let me just go ahead and unhide these weekly rates here. So that'll put the total year then with, if we do get to 294,000 for Q4, that'll put the total year at about 919,000 produced. Again, that's not deliveries, but still, production is what's most important. And if we look at the run rate here, it's even more exciting. 294.5 times 4. That's going to put the run rate at 1,178,000 vehicles per year if that Q4 rate gets annualized. And obviously Tesla is just going to continue to improve that. And that's before we factor in any production from Berlin or Texas. So if Tesla can hit these numbers, I'll be super happy with it. Even if, we're slightly below this, still would be pretty pleased. And I think there's a lot of potential for them to be setting up for a beat, certainly on those, 265,000 delivery expectations. But again, I think reality, the expectations are probably higher. If we just quickly look at the comparisons here, so Q4 year over year would be up 64% with this 295,000. Last year, Q4 was 180,000 almost. And then quarter over quarter would be about a 24% increase, which would be pretty strong for Tesla. Usually we see sort of a 15 to 20% quarter over quarter improvement. But again, I think we saw a step forward in Shanghai. And I think last quarter Fremont production was pretty limited. Not sure exactly why, maybe supply chain, maybe something else, but removing some of that limit, adding in Model X is kind of what's getting us to that better than normal growth. Excuse me. We then are looking at the 919,000 from a year over year perspective would be up 80% in terms of production. Remember, 2020, we did have a little bit of downtime there in Fremont, particularly Shanghai, a little bit less from just pandemic shutdown. So not the fairest base, but still 80% is phenomenal, and certainly would beat Tesla's 50% target, even if they'd had full production throughout the entire year last year. Fremont would be up 23%, and then obviously the main improvement coming from Shanghai doing 481,000 vehicles under this forecast versus 174,000, or sorry, versus I don't think I have that listed there, but it'd be versus 2020 production of 154,000. So really phenomenal progress in Shanghai this year, throughout the entire year, and expecting that to continue into Q4. All right, so I think that is it on production. Let's scroll over here to deliveries, which I have a lot less information on. But basically what I'm forecasting here, as we know that Tesla's working on unwinding the wave, the quarter end delivery wave, I do expect Tesla to build their inventory. We came into this quarter off of the end of Q3 with just 6 days of inventory. That's extremely low for Tesla. You can see that they out-delivered. So I have change in inventory here. I know that's title's really hard to read, but zoom in a couple more ticks here. The change in inventory last quarter, Tesla delivered about 3,600 more vehicles than they produced. So oftentimes you see that swing back the other direction. You can see these kind of oscillate in terms of building inventory, draining inventory. So with the drain last quarter, should expect inventory to build this quarter most likely, plus the unwinding of the wave factor. So I'm expecting 8,000 vehicles to be added to inventory. And that is basically based on just looking at sort of the swings that we have seen historically. You see a few in here that are, 14,000, 12,000. There's a couple reasons I'm not forecasting for that big of a increase in inventory, primarily because Tesla is now working from 2 factories. And as they do that, there's going to be more localization and less need for a lot of vehicles to be stuck in transit. That's definitely what we've seen in some of these cases before. I can't remember. I think it was probably 2019 where we just had 14,000 vehicles here in transit because Tesla was shipping the Model 3 to Europe for the first time. So some of these are just kind of outliers, but if we remove those outliers and factor in the increase in localization, I think 8,000 is more on the higher side in terms of the variances that we have seen. So I'm expecting it to be on the higher side based on that unwinding, but hopefully nothing too dramatic. So again, you could probably have done the math on this, but if I expect 8,000 vehicles in inventory, that would put my delivery forecast, which again, I don't really care about. Obviously, it'll influence earnings a little bit more, but that would put my delivery forecast at 286,600 vehicles. So again, let's just look at the comparisons here. For the year, that would put Tesla at 914,000 vehicles delivered, up 83% year over year. Quarter over quarter, we'd be up 19%. So again, deliveries up a little bit less because of the flip in inventory. And that's pretty comparable to what Q3 was up 20% quarter over quarter. And then from a year over year perspective, this will put Q4 up 59% over Q4's deliveries last year of 181,000 vehicles. So I think that is it. And now I need to go. So I gotta catch my flight, but hopefully I didn't miss anything there. Let me just quick take a look at my notes. I think that was everything that I kind of wanted to mention. I know a lot of people like to keep track of forecast versus actuals again. The point here is just to kind of understand, where Tesla's rate is at, give us a better idea of where things are progressing to for next year. It's not to necessarily, nail the number on the head. Obviously that's nice, but really it's better to understand just sort of the range. And again, I think plus or minus 5,000 here, maybe 7,000 or so. It's probably in the ballpark. And I think if that ends up being the case, anything in that range is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with. So especially considering no production from Berlin and Texas. So a lot to look forward to. What I was kind of saying there is that if you do, want to post these estimates on Twitter or whatever, that's fine. Just again, production 294.5, deliveries 286.5. People always mix those up and always post my production as my delivery forecast. So just wanted to note that. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for today then. As always, thank you for listening. Tomorrow we are going to do an FSD beta video, so I'm obviously traveling, but wanted to get that out. So it's a good one. I think definitely worth watching. I recorded that last night, but we'll post that sometime tomorrow. But anyway, thanks for listening. As always, make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And the next time we talk, other than that pre-recorded video tomorrow, will be, I guess, probably January 2nd if we do